toward a better understanding of the Book of Revelation. Revelation 1-11. John is hereby giving his revelation as a guidebook and a testimony to the 7 churches of Asia, of his own experiences while in meditation. These congregations were as despairing refugees, persecuted and some fallen away, who needed to know a way whereby they could bring into activity the forces of regeneration latent within each individual body. This was the purpose of the book. John's opening greeting serves to introduce, perhaps, the concept of the Christ consciousness from within as being the true author of the book, who is now one with Jesus, the man, who became the Christ. He it was, who first fulfilled the pattern of man's evolution and then turned to redeem and reclaim the rest of the race. Alpha and Omega refers to the plan for all evolution, only partly fulfilled at present, which has within it the power to bring about a successful outcome for man in terms of experience in the world. John now states his position as a fugitive also and in dire straits while living in the Isle of Patmos to which he had been banished. John explains that he was in meditation on the Lord's day, and what follows takes place within his own body and mind. This is true of the whole book, containing all the images, symbols, and forces described here. The instructor is to be the Overself, the symbol of the higher self, the superconscious mind, which is endowed with universal consciousness and is the real entity that always survives physical death. The actual physical 7 churches of Asia are to be the recipients of the ensuing book, but they will also be used as symbols for the 7 glandular centers in the human body, where the physical forces of the body, the mental forces, and the spiritual all come together. These are the key spots throughout the body, known as the endocrine system. A church is a meeting place. Through the imagery of the candlesticks, John is shown that within each center is a mind cell, the light of which would symbolize intelligence, which is in charge of the functions of each center. These in turn are in the control of the superconscious mind with supreme intelligence. The Overself, or the superconscious mind, explains that it is in perfect control of all physical and mental states, and John is urged to describe his findings for the use of others. The relationships of all the parts of this own body to the whole. The Overself is speaking, pointing out to John the need for a cleansing and purifying of the forces of the gonads. The Overself is aware of the efforts of the intelligence found here to regulate and guard itself against destructive activities and pursuits, but says that the original purpose of this center has been lost. The mind cell is urged to bring about a return to the original purpose quickly, or lose its intelligence entirely. This would mean degeneration to the point of animalistic function of this center, instinctual but without intelligence. In this verse, the Overself gives a clue to the great riddle of the tree of life referred to in the book of Genesis, a riddle of the ages in the Western world. John is told that anyone who can regain control of this center could bring about within his body and mind, as well as in his worldly circumstances, complete restoration of the law of healing and supply. The Overself instructs John to see that the intelligence in charge of the cells of Lyden or Lyden gland is reassured, so to speak, for the sense of inadequate creativity in their function. That their possibilities are infinite once the unregenerate cells which thwart and limit the activity of this center are eliminated through a period of purification. If the forces of this center will be faithful to the discipline imposed upon it, complete control will be restored to the intelligence in charge. The cells of Lyden seem to be the center of what, on the mental level, is called imagination. That is to say, the forces moving up from the gonads as pure energy take form at this point. In a mental sense again, purpose or ideals would be generated here in conjunction with the pituitary. The cryptogram here seems to say that the individual who gains control of this center will not be liable to regression from partial regeneration. The Overself now addresses himself to the mind cell, or intelligence of the adrenal center, through John. This center is commended for its adherence to its basic purposes even during periods when control of adrenal functions has sometimes been lost. The adrenal intelligence is warned, however, against the misuse of its energies owing to the presence of unregenerate cells here, implying the need for purification on this level also. The two-edged sword symbolizes the power rising from the centers, which either blesses or curses, according to the will. Thus, the Overself promises prompt surgery for the cells which resist discipline on this level. Now, the Overself states that as a result of perfect restoration of self-control of the 7 centers, the individual can renew and regenerate himself at will as the Master did, by apparently releasing hormones from the adrenal into the bloodstream directly, as a result of the impact of the spirit upon the endocrine system. Moreover, in the resulting higher state of consciousness, the individual and knowledge of his relationship with the higher forces can effect contact with them at any time. The Overself is speaking to the intelligence, or mind cell of the thymus center. He commends its functions to date even though it is under a condition of limitation, and promises that fulfillment will ultimately come about in abundance. Now he urges purification against the persistence of this center to misuse the divine forces for personal satisfaction. Time has been given in which to bring this about. However, if the faults are persisted in, only disintegration and decay can result. This, in turn, would automatically bring unbalance to the other centers. The Overself, being in charge, is examining constantly the controls and the motivations of each center. The mind cell and those cells still free from misuse, however, will not be called on for any additional duties. These are admonished to retain the ideals of their perfect pattern. To the man who remains true to the perfect pattern which is within each one of us, absolute control will be given him over all parts and all functions of the body. Such a man would return to his first condition in consciousness, complete master of his environment. Meditate on these things. The Overself is addressing himself to the mind cell of the thyroid center, the seat of human will. The human will is an academic fact, but its true function has been lost. The center is warned of its condition, and is admonished not to let it go any further. Otherwise, when it is tested suddenly, it will be found imperfect. The cells, however, who have adhered to their inner perfect pattern shall continue in perfection. The man who overcomes temptation on this level will have perpetual access to the creative forces. Meditate on these things. The Overself is addressing the mind cell of the pineal center, the seat of all memory and record. The pineal has apparently been true to itself and its purpose in recording all experiences of the individual and bringing them into comparison with the perfect pattern within the soul. At this point, all imperfections and error in motivations and functions stand out in bold relief. Correction and reform must result, since the pineal is under the special custody of the Overself, as it were. Because of this accuracy, this center is not subject to the instabilities of the other centers in the ways of temptations, etc., but automatically records everything good and bad. The pineal is urged to continue in its faithfulness, and when it is subjected to trial it will not lose control. The man who has overcome on this level, the Overself says, will be in possession of his entire soul record of all his experiences in the earth, and in possession of a new consciousness that will make it unnecessary for him to reincarnate any more. He will now be in complete God consciousness. Meditate on these things. The Overself is addressing the mind cell of the pituitary center now. This is the master gland. The forces of the pituitary or master gland have bogged down in materiality, so to speak, having become satisfied with limitation and circumscribed consciousness. The Overself will have no part of such a negative attitude. The Overself counsels this center to enrich itself by accepting the wisdom that comes through living, vital experience, to be clothed in the purity that does not reveal any fault or inadequacy, and to gain in perception and awareness. This is the advice given to all cells of all centers, that they return to their original purpose. The Overself is available to any man who will accept this counsel. He says, but the individual, it is implied, must open the door. When this happens, union of the personality and the Overself is possible in the individual, just as Jesus, the universal Christ or pattern, was united with the Father God. Meditate on these things. John is speaking now, and he tells us that at this point, a mental awakening occurs. The Overself offers himself as a guide. The Overself shows himself in point of control of the entire body-mind. The stones and colors symbolize attributes, like judgment, justice, mercy, etc. Before the control point of the superconscious mind are the lesser control points of the 5 senses. The 24 cranial nerves. Also the intelligences of the 7 centers of the endocrine system are shown as lamps. The sea of glass before the throne symbolizes the stilled emotions, the condition which will allow the Overself to rule. The beasts full of eyes before and behind represent the 4 lower centers full of awareness of self. The attributes of these centers are 1. Self-gratification, thymus, 2. Self-preservation, adrenals, 3. Sustenance, Lyden, 4. Propagation of the species, gonads. These are shown to be in a condition of complete harmony with the Overself, at which point the 5 senses relinquish their rulership over the body. John is speaking and telling of his experiences in meditation. The Overself is shown at point of control of the human body. Body symbolized as a book. The book is sealed, that is, the real knowledge of the body is sealed up in the control points of the endocrine system. Opening these centers is beyond the ability of the average man. John senses that only through the development of Christ consciousness through experience will enable him to open the centers. To the Christ conscious man only is the custody of the entire body entrusted. Such development of an individual is attested when the lower centers and the senses acknowledge his control. John is informed by the entire aggregate of bodily parts and their forces that this power over the body-mind comes only as the result of the death of the selfish self or self-will. In the regenerating, Christ-conscious man, the lamb is the symbol of the regenerating man. John perceives the energies of the gonads as this center is opened by the forces of regeneration within his own body. The intelligence of the gonads bids him, "Come and see." When the next center is opened, the forces of the adrenal are released. This is the main source of physical energy, which is capable of galvanizing the body into action, for constructive or destructive purposes. When the regenerating will opens the Lyden center, the warning is given that for every spiritual gift there is a price and a penalty for the misuse of each gift. When the thymus is opened, the ravages of degeneration are shown through loss of consciousness and feelings of guilt as a result of self-gratification of the body. The opening of the thyroid center discloses latent powers of the will, which have been immobilized through misuse, and which will have to wait for the regeneration of the other cells which are in process of being refined. The opening of the pineal center is accompanied by bodily trembling and loss of consciousness, with the life essence centering only in the subconscious, with loss of mental impulses to the physical. Old ideals are swept away together with all material attainments and limited concepts. Even the directing and controlling intelligence of the body bury themselves in matter in an attempt to avoid correction by the forces of the Overself and the regenerating will. John now observes the 4 controlling intelligences within himself. These are those which have custody of the 4 essences that go to make up the physical body. The emotional natures and all fluids. The mentality. The soul forces. In the body, these would be bones, muscles, tendons, skin, having to do with construction. The organs of vital fluids, lungs, heart, blood, liver influences, and the organs of the mental, physical, and spiritual, such as the central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord. Also the cerebrospinal system, including senses plus sympathetic nervous system and ductless glands. The four intelligences of these four general classifications are instructed to withhold action against these elements until certain principal cells throughout the body are stamped with the perfect pattern of Christ's purpose. The total of these spiritualized cells throughout the body number 144,000. Because of the influence of these perfect cells, the whole body, in the sum of all its cells and atoms, will be regenerated and brought into realignment with the ruling force of the developed Christ consciousness. John senses that these cells have been purified and regenerated through the abrasion of their experiences in matter, and can now be relied on for perfect service, without breaking down. From now on, also, there will be no breakdown in their contact with the law of supply. Resumption after pause of opening 6 of the 7 centers. Now the Overself opens the pituitary center, as a result of perfect control of the mind for half an hour. John sees the entire endocrine system being restored to the rightful position of command by the superconscious, or Overself. Next, the accumulated experience for good, won by the soul in the earth, appears as a force, or intelligence itself. This mind force infuses the new material with the vitality of regeneration and injects it into the physical structure. The body reacts spasmodically. As a result of the activity of pituitary, the entire endocrine system is recharged. When the gonads release their hormones into the bloodstream, under these conditions, purification of the organs begins. Through the crystallizing of the emotions and a burning out of a portion of the growths and developments of the purely physical. Next, the adrenals follow the example of the gonads in turn, removing the conflicts caused by the warring of the spiritual forces against the physical desires, and cleaning out old patterns of energy. The Lyden in turn brings about correction of the ideals, which creates disillusionment with former forms and concepts. The thymus activity results in partial loss of consciousness. More upheavals in the body are promised as a result of the activity of the 3 upper centers, not yet heard from. The thyroid releases its hormone into the bloodstream. Now the control of the ED, or area of repression, is given over to the will, which deliberately releases the contents. Consciousness is dimmed by the confusion brought about by the released negative repressions. Old regrets and guilt feelings are activated. Yet these do not injure the natural growths or development, but strike at those cells which carry no pattern or program of development in them. However painful, this does not kill them. The descriptions of the repressed thought forms indicate malformation and a hybrid nature, yet they carry force, in the power of their guilt feelings. These are the creatures resulting from self-will, or lusts in the body. 3 mental centers are being activated here. Only the action of one has so far been given. The pineal now activates the latent energies, retained in the 4 original elements of John's makeup, 4 changes in the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, to be made through the practice of what he has learned. A third part of the cells are purged, yet those that are unaffected continue to manufacture false concepts, create Frankensteins and materiality, and go on misapplying the divine God force. The Overself is shown now in complete control of the body with all the endocrine centers open. He is shown master of the entire emotional and physical nature at this point. He demonstrates his command over the 7 centers. John is forbidden to record the knowledge revealed in this demonstration, since he is not yet ready for a complete understanding of his divine nature. Time shall be no more, 4th dimensional consciousness? John is now urged to take over the body from the control and custody of the Overself. The Overself, or superconscious, tells him that mere knowledge of his divine physical nature may be sweet to contemplate. But it is digested and made part of him only through the bitter experiences in the world through personal application. John then found this out through his own experience. He is now told that he must apply that which he has learned to all peoples, in all conditions. In Chapter 11, the Overself is showing John his relationship to all mankind, in a collective sense, that the pattern of the collective soul follows the structure of the individual. The Overself instructs John to evaluate man's mind at the point of union between the human and the divine. The physical intellect, however, is given over to conditions of limitation, which for a time will crush to earth the innate ideals. During this period, all results of these conditions are recorded and judged by the function of the subconscious and superconscious minds, bringing about cycles of natural retribution. The subconscious and superconscious are the vehicles of the law of healing and supply, and when their forces are wasted by the activities of lust and self-will, their original function is lost for a time. However, they are latent, not completely lost. The body, now freed from these restricting factors, now gives itself over to complete indulgence. When these latent functions are reawakened, however, great changes in the body follow. John's experience in regeneration has been completed. The pattern of collective man's experience with the law of healing and supply has been laid out, and now comes the redemption of the whole race as it acknowledges God as the source of all supply and healing, through a purging of the senses and universal enlightenment.